It's estimated by Thrive Business Strategies that only 23% of companies have a strategic plan in place to help them make important and impactful decisions in order to ensure the viability of their business. Alex Brueckmann is an entrepreneur, author of 2 books, and keynote speaker. He helps businesses to build intentional strategies, to build a business and live a life that they're proud of. He's also a big proponent of living your life and running your business with intentional purpose, and he's developed a framework which is entitled The 9 Elements of Organizational Identity, which is intended to help people build better businesses. And Brueckmann joined me this week to tell me more about running successful businesses, his international business experience, his experience living in Canada, and so much more. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. We began our conversation by discussing why it's so vitally important to establish intentional strategies which will help you win in business.
I would say the first thing that we need to understand when we talk about business strategy is what is it actually, and how can any business owner build a business strategy that is intentional, as you rightly said. And what I often find is that we do a lot of things just by default. We don't really ask ourselves whether we really want to do these things, whether they help us with building the businesses that we want to build, or whether they are just in our life because they've always been there. So when we ask ourselves, how do we invest our time, ideally, in order to build a successful business, we are already, let's say, making the first step toward creating an intentional strategy. And when we use the term strategy, what I really mean is to understand where your business should be in 2 to 3 years' time and defining the priorities that will eventually get you there.
Yeah, so let's define those priorities. What are the priorities that will allow you to build intentional business strategies, in your opinion?
The priorities obviously depend on the business that you run, right? So at the stage of the stage of the life cycle you're in, whether you're a brand new business or whether that business has been around for some time, it heavily depends on the industry you're in. So there is no one-size-fits-all strategy for everyone, for every business. But what you definitely can do is you can go through a process that consists of a few steps in order to figure out what these priorities actually are for you. So let's assume you are a new business owner and your business is maybe a year or 2 years old. And you ask yourself, okay, where do I want to be with that business in 2 to 3 years' time? Is that business something that should be the one and only business that I run, or maybe it is a side hustle in the very beginning? How does the transition look like? And if you decide, yes, I want to do this full-time, then your priority or one of your priorities would probably be to figure out how to grow your business. So selling more of your services and products, gain experience with your customers, listen to them, gather feedback, and step by step refining your approach, improving your product and service quality, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, I'm also curious to ask you about defining an inclusive business culture. What do you think it means to be inclusive in business?
This term means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When I when I use the term inclusiveness in business, I'm really looking for the obvious things, of course, right? Being inclusive means listening to what people have to say, listening to every opinion in the room, making sure you tap into the wisdom of everyone around you. But it also means to intentionally and consciously bring people into your sphere that approach life or business potentially in a different way than you do. Just because the way you do it works for you doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way. And for other people, things work differently. So learning from each other with an open mind, rather than just heads down, do the things the way you do and nothing else works. That's not the approach that I take. So being inclusive means valuing what's around you and seeing what works for you and making sure that the people around you also feel valued for their contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of feeling valued, Alex, is also including folks with disabilities. So outside of hosting this podcast, my friend, I also help businesses infuse their workforce with individuals with disabilities. So tell me about the importance of making sure that individuals with disabilities are infused in the business culture as well. How important is that in terms of creating a business diversification in your view?
I work a lot with very large businesses, and these businesses heavily benefit from including people from all walks of life, with all different kinds of backgrounds, people with special needs. Everyone brings a unique value to a business, and I figured that especially large businesses that feel either they are required by law to also be an equal opportunity employer, or they have just realized that there is specific skills that these people often bring that they can tap into. Whatever the reason is, I personally feel that it is a way richer work environment and richer work culture when the work environment actually represents society. And society is very, very colorful, very diverse, and includes people with special needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, I know that you've ran companies both in Canada and in Europe, and you've also led projects all around the world. So tell me, when you look at the term business diversification in terms of the different ways that we conduct business around the world, what do you think about it? And tell me about the experience about running businesses in other countries as well.
It's super interesting when you actually run businesses in various countries, because the let's say just starting from the administrative burden that is very different from country to country. Everything around taxes, anything around how you report your income, how you actually monitor how a company does and what's required by law. And this is so interesting to learn how countries are different and approaching it differently. But also from a work culture experience, it is very different. For example, when you compare North America and Europe, there are so many differences. And not only, you can't just say North America and Europe, you actually need to better understand where you are in North America and where you are in Europe. So France, Germany, the UK, 3 countries in Europe, very, very different countries. And when we work with clients in different countries, it's one of the most important elements in our work is to understand what is the work culture, like the soil that our work falls onto. And when we neglect culture and diversity and how they approach conducting business in different countries, as service providers, we're actually leaving a huge opportunity untouched. because these cultures can amplify and accelerate the work that we do if we take them into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, I'm also wondering your thoughts on how leadership, strategy development, and entrepreneurship are all interconnected because in one way or the other, they're all threaded together, aren't they?
In a certain way, yes, they are. Let me put it slightly differently. I would say an entrepreneur, and I consciously include corporate leaders in this. They cannot be successful if they lack leadership skills, and they cannot be successful if they lack strategic acumen or strategic skills in general. If you want to climb the corporate ladder, or if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, you need to have at least a non-critical level of understanding when it comes to both leadership and strategy development. It's all about people in the end, and we can't grow our businesses without leading people and without including them and valuing them and knowing how to communicate. All these people skills play an important role when you scale a business. And in the same context, if you run a business and you're unable to consciously create the future of that business and prioritize your resources accordingly to achieve that future, to reach it, then you will eventually go out of business, because you're just losing ground, and your competition will overtake you. That's why it is so critical for leaders to be strategic, and for strategists also to understand how to lead people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know your passion, Alex, specifically lies in helping your clients build profitable businesses that are rooted in purpose. So I'm wondering if you can expand on your passion for me and how important you believe that leading with a purpose is important in business.
So if we talk about purpose, I try to leave that term actually behind these days, because I see that a lot of companies are using purpose just as a veneer that they wrap around a less noble core. They are purpose washing. They are saying one thing but actually doing another thing. And there are many famous examples out there of companies that, for example, collaborate with the World Wildlife Fund on the one hand. On the other hand, they are being accused of being massive plastic polluters. So if we want to understand in the corporate concept, in the business context, if you want to use a concept that is probably more powerful than the concept of purpose, we could look at impact. So what is the impact that a business really wants to create? And that is more tangible than talking about an idealistic purpose, for example. So I often say purpose is your intention. What you actually do with that intention, what you really create, the tangible impact that you create out there in the world, that is what people will see and what will truly matter to people. I believe that corporate purpose, no one cares about corporate purpose. No one cares about it. I don't buy a product or a service because I believe in the purpose of a company. What I do is I tend to be drawn toward companies that really create a tangible impact out there. They're not just talking, they're acting. And I believe the concept of purpose combined with the concept of impact is something truly powerful and can help us as consumers to decide which companies we would like to support with our money by purchasing their products and services. And when we approach it from an entrepreneurial perspective or from a corporate perspective, we really need to understand that we need to move beyond intention. We need to move beyond purpose. We really need to put our money where our mouth is and create the impact that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in your upcoming book, Alex, you have created a new framework, what you're calling the 9 elements of organizational identity. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about it.
Yeah, that is actually the concept that will be the centerpiece of my second book, which comes out in September 2023, most likely. This book creates or describes a step-by-step process on how to use strategic work frames in your organization to create a lasting competitive advantage. And actually, I described the entire process step by step so that you can just take it and do it on your own. You don't need any external consulting companies to come in and tell you what to do. You probably know best what to do. It's often just that the frameworks are missing. So I provide that framework, which helps you understand some of the fundamental principles of your business. So, for example, what the impact is that you would like to create, and then also define a strategic, prioritized plan, how you create or achieve the vision that you want to achieve in your business, so the desired state in the future. And it also talks about those things that make change last in your organization. So adjusting the management systems that come with it, or also talking about the individual skills that might need it to succeed, that might be needed to succeed, both on an individual level from you as a company owner or from the people that work with you.
Yeah, and Alex, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today was to also talk about when a business inevitably goes through rough patches or unexpected sort of halt in business. It's also important to have that organizational structure to absorb any challenges in the business, isn't it?
It depends. So the punches that your businesses receives, it's I often say small businesses don't have a lot of body fat to absorb these punches. So it's really interesting to ask yourself how well you are prepared for the next inevitable crisis that's just around the corner. And if you answer that question for yourself and you realize, I probably already am operating on a shoestring budget and everything is really tight, and you probably relatively quickly realize where the holes are in your structure, in your system, in your processes. And it's about time then to realize that the smaller you are, the more urgent it is to prepare for the next inevitable crisis. If you run a bigger business, if you are a leader in a larger organization, it is very likely that organization can absorb some of these body punches, right? But even the big businesses, and we've seen it through the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of big businesses came into very rough waters and almost went out of business, and several did go out of business because their business model and their reality already was under pressure before COVID hit. COVID in the end was just the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, how do you look at sustainability in business, and how do you think small business owners can put sustainability into practice on a larger scale?
There is a lot of talk about sustainability in a lot of different contexts. So I strongly believe that running a sustainable business is actually fairly simple. You just need to ask yourself consciously what you're doing and whether this is causing more harm than it does good. And sometimes, and this heavily depends on the reality of your business and what you do, sometimes it's really easy and it doesn't cost a lot of money to overhaul how you operate and make your operations more environmentally, socially sustainable. I strongly believe that when we think about and talk about sustainable businesses, the key to succeeding is to help people see what you're doing, to help people understand what you're doing. When you are in an industry, for example, that is not very well known for its sustainability practices, embracing this as an opportunity can be just a really good idea for you. And then amplifying it, talking about it, including your customers and your clients in this conversation, helping them see what you're doing, learning from them as well about their expectations when it comes to sustainable business is a very good idea. And there are countless examples out there of companies that have been doing exactly that. both smaller businesses, but also really big businesses that have just used their regular marketing budget, for example, and changed the rationale about what they are talking. So if you are really doing something in the sustainability space that is worth talking about, just use your existing marketing budget and gear it and shift the focus how you use it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need more money. It's just the way that you use your money to make people aware of what you're doing and then going into a conversation with them.
Yeah, and Alex, I want to touch on your educational background as well, because I know you have an international educational background, and you also spent some time at Harvard as well. So tell me about your educational background and how it really impacted the person you are today.
I have a fairly uncommon upbringing when it comes to my education. So my original job is I'm a radio journalist. So I went through professional education as a radio journalist. Later on, wanted to learn more about business, so I went to business school and studied general management. And then I've always been a believer in lifelong learning and in continuous education. So I think for the past 10 years, there hasn't been a year where I haven't gone through some sort of certification, either in the context of executive coaching, leadership development, or strategy. And these programs, they are often from universities. For example, you mentioned Harvard, but there are tons of others out there as well, where you can visit courses, gain additional knowledge, and just refine your own skill set. And I believe that this is something super important. And it has become more and more accessible because knowledge is abundant and it's out there. And actually, you don't need to spend a lot of money to learn new skills. For example, YouTube is one of my favorite examples. There is so much content for free out there that you can just acquire when you're interested in a certain topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, before we started our conversation, you told me that you've got a new 3-year-old son. So tell me about being a dad and the joy that brings to your life as well.
For me as a business owner, being a father is just the perfect counterbalance. Sometimes it's struggling, but sometimes it brings a struggle, and sometimes it's not that easy to balance my personal wish to be there for my son and, for example, the requirements that my clients have. So, I've managed over time, and I've learned to protect my own interests over the interests of other people, for example, customers or my son. You also need to make sure that you have enough time for yourself to avoid that your cup is empty. And it's a wonderful balance to see my son grow and to see my business grow. And just I see myself like a gardener sometimes, making sure that the things and people around me grow, and it's the joy of my life to raise a kid. He's my only child, and it brings a lot of joy and smiles into our lives.
Oh, well, Alex, I tell you, that's going to be the most important job you'll ever have, being a dad, right?
You're absolutely right, Kevin.
Absolutely. And Alex, tell me, I know you live in Vancouver now, but I know that you've had a winding road in terms of your travel and your upbringing. So tell me where you hail from and why you love the Canadian West so much, buddy. Why do you love Vancouver?
You know what? It's always the same. The reason why people move is either because they fall in love with someone who lives somewhere else or because they follow a job opportunity. And for me, it was the love. I met my girlfriend in Germany. We both lived there, and she told me very early in our relationship that she would like to move back home because she's actually from the Canadian West and was born here around Vancouver. So that's why we came here. It was a coincidence that it just coincided with the birth of our son and the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we moved here in the beginning of 2020, it was a crazy time, but I'm very happy that we made that leap over the ocean. And you ask why I love it so much here. It always depends when you ask me. So right now at the moment when we record this episode, it's January and it's raining like crazy, as always here in the winter. So I always doubt that decision during the winter, but in the summer, it's just so beautiful here. The outdoors are amazing. And let's be honest, it's a very international and very mixed environment here. There's so many immigrants from so many countries across the world that it is just, it's really enriching for everyone here to see how different cultures, different religions can live peacefully together. It's kind of my own personal utopia here.
Well, it allows you to embrace adventure, doesn't it?
It really does. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, tell me, when you look at the future of entrepreneurship, what do you forecast as its immediate and long-term future as well?
I'm not sure I'm well positioned to forecast the future of entrepreneurship as such, but I can only say that there are more and more people that find their joy and fulfillment in founding their own businesses. And I've had a corporate background. I worked for a consulting company. Being an entrepreneur, being self-employed, is most likely the most fulfilling work that I've done in my life. Not because you're your own boss, because you're never really your own boss. If you run your own business, your clients are your boss in a certain way. But because you are in charge of defining where the business is going. And as such, it is also in your control and your duty to then follow through on what you want to build. And if you are a small business owner and you have a family, it just means you have so much more responsibility to take care of things, which for some people is just not the right thing. And for others, it is very, very fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, I've got a couple of more questions for you. And the first has to do with, as an entrepreneur, it's always important as entrepreneurs, before we launch a business, to do market research to see if the market will accept us as entrepreneurs and business owners and adding value to your customers or consumers, isn't it?
Yes, and I would add to that really successful businesses create new markets that aren't out there yet. So and I'm not only talking about technological leaps, I'm really talking about service offerings that aren't available in the market. So if you do your market research, it's really interesting to look for things that the market does not offer yet and ask yourself why that might be the case. And it could be the case that the market simply doesn't need it. So it's important to understand that before you launch your product. Or you can find niches that offer tremendous profit potential just because no one ever tapped into these. So the iPhone, for example, would be a great example. Before the iPhone came to market, no one really knew that they would love this tiny little device that is also a phone, but not necessarily a phone as we were used to. So market research is important, but it's important also to give it your own little edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Alex, my final question for you has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
The term legacy is funny. It has been around for some like in my personal vocabulary, it has been around for some time. And I'm seeing more and more businesses talk about it, about the legacy that they want to leave behind. And also as individuals, as entrepreneurs, as parents, but also as business leaders, we think more and more about what comes after us, what comes not necessarily when we die, but when we move on just to our next adventure. What do we want to be remembered for as a people leader, for example? My personal legacy, this is a difficult question and a very broad one. I try to make it short. As a father, I really want to provide the opportunities to my son to express who he is and who he wants to be. And that has to do with what he wants to learn, what he wants to study, the occupation that he would like to take one day, but it has also to do with who he becomes as a person, how open-minded he becomes, how he contributes to the community that he lives in. And this is something important to me, that I show him certain ways that can help him live a richer life. When it comes to my clients or to my own business in this context, I'm not 100% sure what I want my legacy to be. I'm fairly new in that context, but I do know that I take tremendous pride already in receiving messages from former clients, for example, that tell me years after we've worked together that they still benefit from the collaboration, and they are seeing the fruits of their work coming through. And that gives me tremendous joy, because when you're a strategy facilitator, the work that I do is a long game. You don't necessarily see the results immediately. You see them after several months, maybe even after years. And that is sort of a legacy I take pride in.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Alex, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
The easiest way is to check out my website, alexthestrategist.com. There's tons of information about my upcoming books there. There are also master classes that you can take about strategy development for your business. All these things are on my website, alexthestrategist.com.
Well, fantastic. Alex, I want to thank you for joining me today to share some of your experiences in business and in life, my friend. I particularly want to thank you for joining me this week, as I celebrate my 34th birthday over the weekend. So I want to thank you for being here and helping me celebrate my birthday. It's most appreciated.
It was my pleasure, Kevin. And I wish you all the best for the next chapter of your life, the new year, another turn around the sun. Happy birthday.